Engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweat working for the man, alright. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save a baby from the burning building. Take her home with the sleepless sun, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over this past weekend in racing and preview next weekend. Joining me today is Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing, Mr. Christopher Deharde from Motorsports Tribune, Mr. Richard Youden, race engineer, and last but not least, Mr. Seth Eggert from Motorsports Tribune. How is everybody tonight?
Doing great. Very good, thank you.
All right, so we had our Major American Series. We all had the weekend off for Father's Day, and I certainly hope all of us, all of you folks that listen in, had either some time to racing dads, had time to spend with your kids, or you had time to spend with your dads, or you had time to remember your dad. But you know, I hope everyone had a happy Father's Day. Le Mans was this past weekend. Kaz Nakajima and Sebastian Buemi won Le Mans for Toyota. Toyota's been snake bit, but that other guy, the fill-in guy, Fred something, got all the headlines. So what was his name, Richard?
I don't know.
Alonso. Fernando Alonso.
That's the guy, yeah.
Because
Andretti's fourth driver next year, isn't he?
Fifth, I believe. Yes, that's the hot rumor. So yeah,
I thought he was going to take Marco's seat.
Yeah. So anyways, but you know, all three drivers drove brilliantly. But again, a little sad for Kaz and for Sebastian that Alonso has stolen all their thunder because of this triple crown that he wants to win. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm a little tired about hearing about this triple crown because number one, it doesn't exist. It's a fictional, made-up kind of thing. And on top of that, you can actually change it up however you'd like it to be. You could say, oh, well, it doesn't have to be the Monaco Grand Prix. It could be the Formula One World Championship. You know, you don't say it doesn't have to be Monaco. It could be the Daytona 500, and A.J. Foyt has won it. You know, it's just it's unofficial. It's unsanctioned. And Juan Montoya has as good a shot as Alonso at getting it. As a matter of fact, he was one step closer than Alonso, and Montoya was actually entered in Le Mans this past weekend. Result was not as good as Alonso, but I mean, the funny thing about this Triple Crown, it's invented, and I swear Graham Hill probably invented it. It was probably like a 1971 interview with Graham Hill where he was sitting and they were talking about his racing accomplishments, and he says, well, then, I seem to have won all of the most famous motoring contests there are. I guess that makes me the best sportsman there ever was. I guess you could call that a triple crown. Oh, I like that. Quite smashing, actually. So... And I apologize to you, Richard, for the lousy British accent. But again,
there's another 65 million others of us that you have to apologise to as well.
No, that's taking the piss.
Thankfully, most of them won't hear it.
Yeah, but again, like I say, it's a good job to Toyota. Toyota has been snake bit the last couple of years, but they really pull this one off to perfection with Kaz doing the flyer lap at the very end of qualifying to put that thing on the pole, and just barely turning a wheel wrong all day, all night, and then the next day. So good job, Toyota. Now, Chris, you had a chance to watch Le Mans and see Kaz, Sebastian, and Alonso win the thing. What are some of your thoughts about Le Mans?
Well, it was interesting. A lot of people actually said, oh, Toyota had no real competition when they won this race, but yet a lot of people seem to forget that during the early 2000s, Audi was racking up win after win after win after win. They had no factory competition that were going to, they were really going up against privateers trying their best.
Yeah, but they were, a lot of those privateers were already privateers, weren't they?
Pescarolo was not.
No, there was, I mean, I remember working with one of them, so there were a few, few more privateers, but I get your point, so, sorry.
Yeah, oh yeah, no worries. The GT field, it was interesting to see Porsche do so well. I was hoping for the 91 to win because I love that Rothman's livery. However, one thing I think we should bring to our attention is the fact that we had a winning car excluded from the results. The LMP2 winning car from G Drive was excluded from the race when it was found that the refueling times were 8 seconds faster because of a modification that the team made to the fuel rig. And, this really got me thinking because a lot of things were in this race that really, really spoiled it for me. And what I mean is, it really left a bad taste in my mouth just watching the race because for the GT field, you had maximum fuel stint lengths. You had minimum refueling times in, I think 3 of the 4 classes. Talk about drivers in LMP1 possibly getting drive-throughs as they went quicker than the Toyotas. Yeah, and not just in sports car racing, but I think overall in motorsport, I think we've gotten to the point where motorsports as a whole has got too regulated and has gotten so overregulated that it's impossible for normal, average, everyday people to follow. Housemate and I had a tape on last night of the 6 hours of Mid-Ohio from the early 1980s. And you had some guy driving with Bobby Rahal and Jim Truman. And so we were just joking back and forth, oh, wasn't Jim Truman the silver-rated driver at that point? I wonder, and they said they won by 20-something miles? There was no BOP back then? No, there wasn't. There wasn't any BOP or equivalence of technology or adjustment of technology or whatever. Nowadays it's gotten so tied down by rules and restrictions and regulations and things like that that it's almost gotten comical. And the ACO has just gotten to the point where, they're forgetting that BOP doesn't work everywhere. One car is going to be good at one track, but may not be so good at another track, and trying to adjust them from track to track to track. And in fact, from day to day to day at Le Mans, it's almost a comical it's almost a comedy because you can't make things perfect. And it's stupid, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's been this movement for parity in race cars for a number of years, and because I guess folks like close finishes, But it used to be if you brought a superior car there, you would just stomp the field in an endurance race. I mean, I remember, sometime back in the '80s, the 24 Hours of Daytona, Ted Field and Danny Ungaius had several laps on the field late in the going. And they decided to go ahead and they pulled the car in, waxed the car, changed the fenders, made it look pretty for the pictures in Victory Lane because they had that kind of lead on the field. You wouldn't see that this day and age. But Chris, I wanted to ask you back to that refueling penalty and for the car that was excluded. Did we not see that same kind of thing back at the Rolex in January? We had a car that they made them sit in the pits for several minutes.
Because I think the issue was at the Daytona for Le Mans, they actually modified the fuel itself. So they modified the fuel tank where the fuel would actually flow faster into the tank, and that's how they got the stops to be shorter. The Land Audi. And in my opinion, what the Land Audi team did was clever and actually was really cool. I think that I mentioned about overregulation. Minimum refueling times, driver ratings. You didn't see all this stuff 20, 30, 40 years ago, and quote-unquote was the golden days of Le Mans. You didn't even see minimum refueling times 10 years ago even, right? So it's just been more of an opportunity for people to take advantage of stupid nitpicky things here and there, and really it's taken a lot of the fun out of racing. The days of building the better mousetrap, in my opinion, are almost, done because it's just going to be BOP to death.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, once you get an advantage, they'll find a way to take it from you or to give it to your competitors. So, Now, Gray, Richard, you guys have any comments on Le Mans at all that you'd like to jump in with? Or
Yeah,
Seth?
I did spend quite a bit of time watching the race this year, and I think it's a fantastic series. I mean, I think they've got a great product there. They just need to sell it a little bit better. I mean, it's a 24-hour race, and you're not going to get people sat there watching it for 24 hours, admittedly. And I think the Alonso factor obviously certainly boosted the spectator numbers and the TV audiences, I'm sure. But a lot of the rules things were a little bit sort of unnecessary and a little bit messy in a way there, as you say. And it was a shame there wasn't somebody who could really go up against Toyota and really push them because, they were in sort of, cruise mode pretty much the whole race. I mean, they got a fly on the windshield and they'd pull it into the garage to clean it because they knew they could. It was just a little bit, more of a procession, and you were more waiting to make sure nothing happened to the Toyotas than to see a race there, which was a real shame because there's some fantastic drivers in that series, and to see them not racing is it's a real disappointment.
Yeah, and on top of that, I'm surprised that they didn't have a better television deal for the States. Now, mind you, they broadcast all 24 hours on the Velocity Network. Now, a lot of folks don't have the Velocity Network, and folks that do have the Velocity Network, if you ever watch the channel, it's more of a car culture type of channel. They have, you'll see a lot of car auctions on there, and like this chop cut rebuild sort of thing, or the what's in the garage type programs, and it's a lot of kind of like how to and this and working on your car and customizing cars. And generally, they don't cover a lot of racing. For folks that like to watch Velocity Channel, they might have tuned in and said, "Gosh, what's this?" And folks who are looking for Le Mans on Fox 1 or maybe on one of the ESPNs just couldn't find it. So it's it's kind of mind-boggling. One of the biggest races in the world is on third tier cable TV.
And they didn't do a job of getting the word out either because you just kind of most people just stumbled upon it. And one of the things that I stumbled upon was Ford Performance. They did a Facebook Live, and they had in-car cameras on the 66, 67, 68, and 69 cars, and you could watch it pretty much throughout the entire race.
And that's pretty neat. I mean, more and more racers need to do that with the Facebook Live and the social media. IndyCar has been really good with that, putting their practice and qualifyings on the Facebook Live, the ones that aren't on TV. So
I thought that was very, very neat because it was all in-car cameras that you saw, and then they had the the track radio or the track broadcast, as the audio portion of that feed, and it was I watched that on and off. I watched the on and off, but I really didn't sit down and get a chance to watch. I watched the finish, which was probably about the last 10 or 15 minutes of the race, not too much, but I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, it's a shame that of course Fox was tied up with the World Cup, so I mean that wasn't going to fly this year.
Oh, absolutely,
I think they'll probably return next year and with coverage again next year, but and I wouldn't be surprised if Fox probably has some interest in that Velocity channel and probably kind of just pushed it off on that to just to get it out there.
Well, that's entirely likely. Most of these media corporations own a lot of the other smaller channels, and it's hard to tell who owns what, other than the fact that Disney owns almost everything. So. But Seth, you get a chance to watch any of Le Mans at all, or you're busy watching the trucks at Iowa?
I did watch a little bit of Le Mans. Now, just one note: Velocity is owned by the Discovery Channel, and yes. I watched Velocity off and on mainly when a little bit of a NASCAR connection. Ray Evernham used to have a show on there, Americana. I think it's been off the air for about 2 years now. But anyway, I watched a little bit at the beginning. I was able to watch the end of it, and just to see the joy and the satisfaction on their faces at the very end, that, I was going to say, for some people, I know at least one person who usually does not watch sports car racing, who honestly was interested in the race. So maybe we got a few new sports car racing fans out of that race. People who usually don't watch it try to watch maybe some of those other car shows that are on Velocity. Maybe we didn't. And just one other note, from what I had heard, and granted, I heard this back in like December, so I don't know how accurate it still is or not. I'd heard that NBC was interested in trying to get IMSA and Le Mans.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, IMSA's carried by CBS right now, and actually they do a pretty good job on the CBS Sportsnet. Yeah, it'd be neat to see if NBC wants to step up its involvement with racing, because they've picked up the IndyCar series in its entirety and the Indy 500 for next year. So, speaking of which, let's go back to talking about Alonso, who was sitting biting his fingernails off in the pits, worried that somehow Kaz Nakajima was going to blow his chance at winning Le Mans by having the last stint. Of course, Kaz brought it home. Kaz being a guy who races sports car all year long professionally, and I like Kaz. I just I used to like his dad, Satoru Nakajima. I thought Satoru was a little bit underrated in his day when he used to drive for Lotus in Formula One, because he had a teammate named Ayrton Senna who kind of overshadowed him. But yeah, it's a funny story. I had a model kit of the Camel Lotus, and I'm probably the only person that built that model kit and used the optional decals to make it Nakajima's car instead of Senna's. But that's another story for a different day. But let's talk about Alonso. So now that he's won Le Mans, the talk is all about him returning to Indy. The talk about him returning to Indy has been strong all year. The talk about McLaren coming to Indy has been strong all year long. McLaren has said whether or not they come to Indy is actually not even dependent on Alonso. I mean, they're prepared to still come to Indy with or without Alonso, which I guess leaves Alonso to go to a Penske car or whatnot. But obviously they'd like to do it with Alonso. And then, of course, and then the other weird story is we all saw Michael Andretti at the Canadian Grand Prix hanging out with Alonso and hanging out with some people from Sprint. So the thought there is that McLaren's going to have Sprint sponsorship next year in IndyCar because Verizon will be leaving as title sponsor, which makes it Sprint's got an in right there, and Sprint's ended their association with NASCAR, so they really don't have an involvement in motorsports. So that can be a pretty good deal there. But then the weird story that comes out of it, reported by the British press, is that Michael Andretti may be interested in buying the Force India team and starting his own Formula One team, which was about the last thing I would have thought would have come out of Michael and Sprint and hanging out with McLaren in Canada. So, Richard, what are you hearing about this? Because I think would be pretty foolish of Michael to take that step. I think he'd be better off buying him a NASCAR team if he wants to expand his empire, rather than try to jump foot first into Formula One, where it's such a shark pond.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you take all of the racing series that he's involved in at the moment, combine all of those budgets, multiply it by 10, you're probably going to get somewhere close to what he'd be needing to spend in Formula One. And Sprint just doesn't add up to a greater extent. Formula One's a global business, and you want global brands involved. So, excuse me, I was going to sneeze. Sorry. So it's a global brand. It's a global sport, and Sprint aren't a global brand. They're pretty much North America only. So I don't know if they've got any ties to any other European branding. I know when Vodafone sponsored McLaren, they ran Verizon liveries in Canada, I believe. but I can't see it. I think if Verizon are pulling out of NASCAR, Sprint pulling out of NASCAR because it's not value for money, then I can't see how Formula One would be.
But Sprint on a McLaren IndyCar with Alonso makes a lot more sense than...
100%. 100%. I do totally agree with that. I still don't know about the Alonso to IndyCar thing. I don't know. I really do struggle to see it. For some reason, it just doesn't sit with me. I don't know why. It'd be great to see if it did happen. And, the reaction that it would get and his performance, I think, would be fascinating to watch. But there's something, I don't know, it just doesn't add up. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but something just doesn't add up.
Well, I mean, I can certainly see him at least doing the 500 again.
Oh, for sure.
He's got this made-up Triple Crown. He wants to be the next. He wants to be the Spanish Graham Hill. But I mean, it's a lot of folks are really thinking fifth Andretti car partnering with McLaren, and then in a few years' time, McLaren is independent of Andretti, brings in another manufacturer when the new engine rules take place in 2020, and whether or not Alonso was part of that, McLaren is ready to move forward whether or not he is.
So here's another argument. If you're Andretti, obviously there'd be a financial benefit to you, but, I mean, really, do you want to spend 2 years building a McLaren IndyCar team for them to go off with another manufacturer and win everything? Where's the incentive to them to sort of be part of the deal?
Well, I mean, who's to say Andretti doesn't benefit from whatever manufacturer they bring in? It's hard to tell, because obviously you may not want to come in with one team. You may want another team there. It may be beneficial to Andretti. It'll be beneficial to Andretti for sure in the short term, just for eyeballs on the team if they have Alonso there full time. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. And there's a lot of folks that speculate that yes, this is a done deal. Alonso will be in a fifth Andretti car next year. Other folks like you, not so sure. And Chris, you've got your ear to the pavement in IndyCar. What are you hearing as far as the strength or weakness of these rumors and stories?
I think the issue a lot of fun when he came over to do the 500, but I don't know if what his contract situation is in McLaren right now to allow him to do IndyCar next year, or contracts up after this year, or what the situation is. That being said, the tweets that went back and forth between the Speedway and him and different IndyCar drivers really, really made me think that you might see him in an IndyCar next year. I think he would have a lot of fun doing it, but that's just me.
All right, then. So, Gray or Seth, you care to chime in at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think he's going to go. I think he's got unfinished business in Formula One right now to take care of. But I think his shelf life in Formula One is fast going away. I think he would be probably finish his career possibly in a competitive IndyCar ride. I mean, what do you think, Richard? You think, when he's...
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be a little bit careful with Alonso because he's one of these guys that, for want of a better word, likes the sound of his own voice. If you listen to Alonso, he's the world's greatest driver still, and he's better than Hamilton, better than Vettel, better than, all these guys together.
Well, he is.
Well,
yeah, he's pretty good, I'll give him that.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. But there's the fact that, also part of what makes these guys good is getting to a team at the right time and growing that team around you. And that is the one thing where he has struggled. Hypothetically, Ricciardo goes off to Ferrari and they don't take Leclerc for this year. Does Alonso go to Red Bull for a shot? Would he? I'm sure if he does go to IndyCar, it'll be only until all of the big. I'm sure there'll be a little caveat in that contract somewhere that means he can basically wait until everybody else is sorted out in Formula One before there's, in case Top Drive becomes available.
Yeah, but I mean, is he going to go to Ferrari? Is he going to go to Mercedes?
Ferrari, no, I think the Red Bull one could work.
Yeah, but still, I mean, if you, he's still even Red Bull's probably third on the list.
For sure.
But
with that Honda engine next year, who knows? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. There's something that I mean,
I'm kind of putting him in the same realm as like Mansell. Mansell finished his Formula One career, and he came over here and did the IndyCar thing. Wow. And,
I think I think that would be the only comparison between Alonso and Mansell.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, just the career path, exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right. I mean, and he could, basically he could come back over here and get a top IndyCar ride and finish his career on top.
Yeah, right. And for the record, Mansell went back to Formula One after his 2 years in Indy and embarrassed himself.
Because he couldn't fit in the car.
Yeah, he was. I think he had a season with McLaren. After
he didn't have a season, did he? He had about 2 races, I think. Did he even race? I can't remember now for McLaren.
Oh yeah, he did. He did. Yeah,
he missed the first few races because he wouldn't fit in the tub, and then I think he did 2 or 3 races, and I think he gave up.
Yeah. So it was. So anyway, so let's turn our attention to the races in Iowa, where we actually had some other races. Now, Seth, you watched those with great interest. We'll talk about Iowa a little bit. Then I want to turn our attention back to Formula One and talk about this Honda and Red Bull deal. But first, let's talk about Iowa because Seth's been quiet a little bit. So let's talk about the truck races in Iowa.
Well, you had the truck and the Xfinity Series in Iowa. The truck series, the race was won by Brett Moffitt, and it was such a fitting story. They're struggling with sponsorship, his team. That's his second win of the season. He's locked into the playoffs. They don't have sponsorship as of right now for Chicagoland. It was his home track, and his sponsor was his father's realty company. So it was just a very fitting story for the truck race. In the Xfinity Series, Justin Allgaier absolutely dominated the race. And it's actually his second win of the season, but his first win was essentially encumbered earlier in the year at Dover. So he's now locked to the Xfinity playoffs. Real quick to the Truck Series. On the last lap, Noah Gragson did a Hail Mary video game move coming off of turn 4. Drove in to the corner, probably 15 to 20 car lengths deeper than anybody else had all night. Whipped around Brett Moffitt, slid all the way up the track and into the outside wall. You have to give him credit for at least trying. He ended up finishing second, but it was an entertaining finish nonetheless. Harrison Burton got his best career finish at 3rd place. David Gilliland finished 4th. And Johnny Sauter, who's dominated most of the season so far, finished in 5th. The race for the Truck Series, it was one big incident. It wiped out several good trucks. Matt Crafton, John Hunter Nemechek took out Stuart Friesen, Grant Enfinger, and Dalton Sargent. Friesen ended up recovering to finish 9th. Otherwise, it was a relatively tame race. The Xfinity Series, it blew by. It was very quick. There were only 2 cautions other than the stages. One was for a late absence. The other one was for an early cut tire. Elliott Sadler had a horrific day. He cut a tire just before the end of stage 1, ended up having to pit. Got penalized for pitting while pit road was closed, ended up finishing in 28th, his worst finish of the season.
All right, great report there. Yeah, so now, Gray, you get a chance to watch any of the short track action from Iowa. Iowa's one of those tracks I really like. Well, Gray, what were your thoughts on what kind of aero package did they use on the Xfinity at Iowa? They try out anything different, or they're just doing the standard?
No, I didn't get a chance to watch much of the truck race or the Xfinity race this weekend, but no, they ran pretty much a standard, ran their standard package. That aero package that they've been tried it at Pocono in Michigan, and I think it will return for sure at Indianapolis when they go there in September. And I'm not sure if they're slated to run it anywhere else right now. Seth can probably answer that.
Just Indianapolis as of now. NASCAR hasn't made any decision or announcement if they're going to run it anywhere else.
And it's still, the scuttlebutt's still going around the Cup garage that NASCAR may try the aero package at another race, possibly the second Michigan. But like I said, right now it's just rumor.
And I don't know what track. I didn't catch what track it was, but I know truck teams have been told that they're going to have their own version of the package at a race later on this year. I think Pocono, but I'm not entirely sure which track it was.
Yeah, and I wasn't impressed with that package at Pocono. Pocono is its own animal. It's not like it has similarities to Indianapolis, but basically, I just don't think that package works as well there as it possibly does at somewhere like a Michigan or I thought the race at Michigan was pretty entertaining for the Xfinity cars, and as well as what it was at Indianapolis last year. I just don't think Pocono probably is. You're going to see it. I wasn't really impressed with it at Pocono, but I think that's pretty much just how the race is up there. It's just so different, on the three corners. But we'll see what happens. I'm really interested to see if they institute it in Cup at a race. I'd like to see it on possibly second Michigan race. That would really give us an idea of how this thing's going to work.
And I agree with that. Also, just in the Xfinity Series, going back to Iowa, we had Riley Herbst make his debut. He ended up finishing 6th. Justin Haley made his debut, started 13th, finished 12th. So they both had relatively quiet days. Kaz Gralla, who was in his last race with Fury Race Cars, as of now, they're still dependent on sponsorship for Chicagoland, just like Brett Moffitt. They finished 10th. They had another stellar showing for a team that's only 4 weeks old.
Yeah. I'm concerned about some of these sponsorship problems that some of these Xfinity and truck teams are having. And basically, you got to look no further than attendance and ratings. And, of course, a lot of these, all of the truck races and virtually most of the Xfinity races are on cable and not on network, and I'm thinking sponsors are really, looking at that and deciding whether they want to spend any money. So I don't know what's going to become of that. That's a little bit concerning right now.
On the bright side, though, the Xfinity Series actually had an uptick in ratings for Iowa compared to the same race last year. It was run out by about 4 hours earlier, and they didn't have a rain delay this year, unlike last year. So that kind of helped the ratings this year. Attendance, it wasn't very good. At the same time, I think it was about 100, 110 degrees out in Iowa. There was a heat advisory both days. Mm-hmm. So can you really blame fans?
No,
it's one of those catch-22s.
Yeah, I know. But it just seems like when it rains, it pours, and it seems to be a part of the trend that we're seeing, and that's something that is a little bit concerning that we need and that's across the board in motorsports right now. So yeah, it's it's kind of something that needs to be addressed some way or another.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the trucks and ARCA have a standalone weekend coming up at Gateway.
In Gateway, yes.
Right. Now, the Xfinity cars are
off this weekend.
They're off this weekend. Cup's in Sonoma, and Cup will be racing along with K&N West.
Yes.
So I mean, the truck event at Gateway had a pretty good gate last year, as I recall. So what are we looking forward to at Gateway, Seth?
We have 3 drivers making their Truck Series debut. You have Riley Herbst in one of the KBM trucks. You have Zane Smith in the David Gilliland truck. You have Tate Fogelman, a late model standout, in one of the Young Motorsports trucks. Chad Finley is attempting his truck race in about 3 years, and he's usually an ARCA driver. I want to say one of the reasons he's attempting is because of the spec motor, A, cutting down costs, B, it's so similar to the ARCA motor, and from what I understand, NASCAR is letting some teams use the ARCA spec motor, which is slightly less horsepower than the truck spec motor. So it's one of those where they already have it for the ARCA series, so I think they just may have put it in their truck. You also have Anthony Alfredo.
Wasn't the truck series, don't they have like a common engine this year? Or new?
They got a spec engine.
Right. So that's
not all teams are using it. Brett
okay,
Moffitt's
so
team, for example,
it's a spec engine, but it's not mandated.
It's not mandated as of yet.
Okay.
Brett Moffitt's team is still using an OEM engine, and 2 of the 3 Kyle Busch trucks are using an OEM engine.
Yeah, and it's a wave of the future. It's coming, and of course they haven't instituted it across the board yet. But it's an optional engine. That's probably a better term.
Yeah, and also in the ARCA race, real quick, Anthony Alfredo, who runs full time in the K&N Pro E Series, is making his ARCA debut this weekend.
Okay, so we'll see a lot of new faces there at Gateway. Hopefully they have a good crowd there. I got to hand it to the track owners there. They put on a great IndyCar race there last year. I mean, they brought that track back from the dead, essentially. So I wish them well with their ARCA truck weekend, and certainly wish them well with their IndyCar weekend later in the season. So, but speaking of engines, let's turn our attention back to Formula One for just a moment, where Red Bull has announced that they're going to go with Honda next year. And Richard, you and I had talked about this a while back when the Toro Rosso team went with Honda, that we would probably see Red Bull follow suit. And now Renault has said that they will make Red Bull regret this decision. So, Richard, what are your thoughts on the Honda, the Renault, Red Bull? Good move, bad move? I mean, Honda needs a marquee team after losing McLaren, so
yeah, it's been one of the worst kept secrets in Formula One for a long time, hasn't it? Really, this move from Red Bull to Honda. I don't think it surprises anybody. The only probably thing it does, is it's so late. You'd have expected to see this, far earlier in the season, but. It opens up Red Bull's options. This, goodness me, what would you call it? I mean, the relationship with Red Bull, the love-hate relationship with Renault, the love-hate relationship, been going on now for the last 3 or 4 years. Ever since they haven't won, Renault have been the worst thing in the world. When they were winning, they were, they're okay. So you've got to look at how Red Bull have handled the situation. I think it's been pretty poor on their end. I think the support they've given to Renault hasn't been great. I think they're going to be in for a shock with Honda if they expect anything different. And my personal opinion is that the scenario that was at play here was... I think Renault could have played a really smart card here. everybody knows that Red Bull and Aston Martin are looking at working together to develop an engine. They've had Mario Illian working for them. They've had a lot of very, very smart people on the engine side looking at developing a bespoke engine for the Red Bull. Renault know that. And in all fairness, Renault probably don't want Aston Martin in Formula One. They obviously, more competition, less likely for them to win. So they probably turned around to Red Bull and said, along the lines of, well, if you want to sign a new engine deal with us, it's 3-year minimum. And Red Bull said, well, no, we want to look at Aston Martin for 2021. Honda have turned around and said, hey, look, we need this big marquee team. We'll give you a 2-year engine deal. At the end of the 2 years, you can make that decision. I still envisage quite strongly that for 2021, the Red Bull car will run an Aston Martin engine, and this Honda deal is just a stopgap. Who knows? They could end up going back to McLaren, who are on a 3 and who will finish their 3-year contract with Renault. It could, we could be sat here in 2.5 years' time with an amazing situation of Honda being back at McLaren, Red Bull running the Aston Martin engine, and Renault running their own engine.
Or you could even see Honda going maybe to Williams, who
potentially.
Potentially. Yeah, they've got the Mercedes engine, but they've continually underperformed compared to the Mercedes cars. So that I'm sure they're.
I think they need the money, don't they? Yeah, they certainly
well,
need the money.
yeah, but I mean, you got to wonder: is that power plant in the back of the Williams car the same thing that Lewis Hamilton has in his?
Now. Yeah, I think under the sporting regulations, it has to. You can't do what they did in the past. Dare say when I was there, we had a few, interesting engine modes made available to us that certainly weren't made available to, or that were available to.
Yeah, and Claire Williams has been one of the most vocal about the engine parity rules or whatnot, or the whatever you call it in Formula One. And so you got to wonder is, sure, the rules say this, but if you look at the performance on the track or the performance gap,
I think that if there is any difference between what's in the back of the Mercedes and what's in the back of the Williams, no, I don't think anything of what you see there is has any direct relationship to their performance. I think it's. I think Williams' issues go far, far deeper than that engine.
Okay, fair enough. So next topic.
There you go.
Next topic. So, Chris, you've been quiet for a little bit. So the IndyCars are headed to Road America this weekend. One of the most fantastic race courses in North America. One of my favorite places to go. It's the best place in the world to get a bratwurst, if you're interested in that. But so, Chris, we've got Dixon leading the points now after 2 wins in the last 3 races. Dixon's doing better in IndyCar than he did on American Ninja Warriors last night. So, Chris, what are you looking for Road America weekend? Yeah, you feel like it's going to be a Honda track, a Chevy track, a Penske track, Andretti track, or somebody like a Ray Hall going to jump in there and surprise us, or you're going to see maybe like a Schmidt-Peterson come to life?
I really don't know. We know that Chevys have had the advantage in Indianapolis, which is a true power track. And at Detroit, which is more of a torque track, Honda had the advantage. So I think it's going to be probably a little bit more towards the Chevy side. But I will say this. I'm looking for Honda to come up with something to kind of even the gap between them and Chevrolet, especially with Ryan Hunter-Reay, because Hunter-Reay, if I looked at the stats last night, has top 5 finishes in every race this year except for 2 races. And he's quietly sitting 4th in points right now, and I think a lot of people should take notice of that. And he finished, I think, in the top 5 a couple of years ago at Road America, so he might be someone we want to look out for. Scott Dixon won here last year. Will Power won here 2 years ago. Both are going to be looking to get another win here at Road America. And Bourdais won here back in Champ Car, so it's going to be an interesting weekend. I'm looking forward to being at the track. early on Friday morning. It's going to be a nice. It's going to be a nice weekend, I think. And not only that, we also have the Road to Indy there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all the Road to Indy guys will be there. So, and we've got a guy making his debut, and his name just jumped out of my head in the Juncos car.
Alfonso Solis Jr.
That's right. Alfonso Solis will be in the Juncos car. Come up with a little funding, added one more race to the Juncos, and he's a former Formula One test driver. He's run some Indy Lights. So, what are your thoughts on this young man? I know Juncos is still just getting their feet wet in IndyCar. They're still learning the courses, learning the stuff. But the fact that it gets them another start on the season is not a bad thing. How do you feel like this young man's going to do?
I honestly think that his first goal is going to be to finish, and if he does, I don't think we should have that high of expectations, considering it's going to be only a second time at this particular track. He tested there last week for Ricciardo's team at the track, but then again, when you don't have a lot of other cars there, especially Chevrolet cars there, it's kind of hard to get a lot of data off. I'm expecting, hoping for a top 15 finish. I think that will be best case scenario for the team, considering that this is their first season in IndyCar competition. So a top 15, I think, will be a good day, especially given what the Juncos team has gone through in the last week or so off track.
Yeah, top 15 would actually be a great day for those guys. So we wish them well. We wish him well. Me, as I look at this thing, I've got to look at the performance of Chevrolet at Indianapolis and then also at Alabama and say, yeah, maybe Road America leans towards the Chevrolet. You got to look at a guy like Will Power. You got to look at a guy like Simon Pagenaud, But you got some strong Honda runners. You got to look at a guy like Rossi, who's really is focused on this championship. And again, like you mentioned, his teammate Hunter Ray, who's one of the most experienced guys on the grid right now, who's really had a renaissance season after kind of being, kind of mediocre since about 2014. As the Andretti struggled with the early Aero Kits era. Now that we've evened that up a bit, I think Hunter Ray is trying to mark his territory a little bit and say, hey, you know what, I'm the team leader here, Mr. Rossi, so you and I will duke that out till the end. So it's and Chris, you've got a story about Mossport that you like to bring up here quick. Yeah, so I read your note there. I hadn't heard about this, so fill us in.
They had a Formula 5000 vintage meeting going on at Mossport, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and they had a driver from Peoria, Illinois named Jeff Green, who actually passed away after an incident heading through turn 8 at Mossport, coming down the back straight. Now, the reason why this is so significant, why I think it should be brought up on the show, is Jeff Green from Peoria, Illinois, not the Jeff Green that ran in the Xfinity Series way back when, or back then it was known as Busch Series.
Right, this is Jeff. Jeff J. Green, he goes by, right?
Yeah.
I did read he died. I didn't realize he died racing.
Yes, from a Formula 5000 incident. He was driving at Mossport, and the reason why it's significant that I think it could be put up here, Jeff Green bought Ricardo Juncos' Pro Mazda equipment last year before the season started and tested with the team at Homestead in the preseason testing and decided that he liked the car a lot and wanted to actually run the entire season instead of just doing the first couple of races. And he said he wanted a teammate to help him out get quicker, and that teammate happened to be Victor Franzoni, who won the Pro Mazda championship last year. So without Jeff Green, Victor Franzoni never would have done Pro Mazda, never would have won the championship. So really we have Jeff Green to thank for helping out a young driver, help pursue his dream in the Indy, and Green did a lot to help out Victor, and the entire Road to Indy staff are going to be thinking about Jeff Green this weekend. I think it also is worth noting that at Road America last year, Green actually finished fifth in one of the races at Pro Mazda races at Road America, and finished fifth at Gateway. and he was 60 years old, which is amazing for him to drive at that age.
That's sad to report, but we're thinking about his friends and his family, and it's never happy when we lose somebody, but at least he's doing what he loves. So, but let's move on. We've got a few minutes, about 10 minutes left in the show to kind of preview. Speaking of road racing and Road America and all these great road races, well, NASCAR is going to be at Sonoma this weekend. So, Gray, let's talk about Sonoma. I mean, you've been out there with your team in the past. It's been a mainstay on the NASCAR schedule since sometime in the 90s. So we've got. It's kind of weird. We only have, I believe, 6 winners this year in NASCAR. Usually we have a lot more by this point. But you think we'll see a new winner for this year after at Sonoma, because it's certainly a wild card.
I think we'll probably get a couple of more winners, before the season's out. I don't know if we'll have any new winners or not, but
new winners on the season.
Yeah, new winners on the season. I think we'll get a couple before the chase starts. We'll have a couple to join what the current winners we got, but I don't think it's going to happen at Sonoma this weekend. I think going out there, you got to look at Harvick. He's defending champion out there. Know how well he's running. We got his teammate Clint Boyer, who's won out there before. Kyle Busch, who's won there before, running well. Truex has won there before. He's running well. So I mean, I think probably your winner's going to come from one of those 4.
All right, Seth, do you agree or disagree with Gray?
I somewhat agree, but somewhat don't agree.
Okay, thank you for your non-committal answer.
Looking like a politician.
Essentially, I think there will be a lot of the races will be from one of those 4. I just don't think one of those 4 is going to win at Sonoma.
And so then who do you think is going to win at Sonoma?
Well, honestly, I'm looking at Daniel Suarez. I'm looking at AJ Allmendinger, Michael McDowell, some of the drivers who are excellent road course racers who aren't in, other than Suarez, aren't in the best equipment, but this is their best shot to do a Hail Mary other than Watkins Glen and Daytona, frankly, and make the playoffs.
Okay, now, Richard, do you have some opinions on what we're going to see at Sonoma this week?
You look at some of those names mentioned there briefly. The likes of AJ and Clint Boyer and guys like that. But I think one thing that has helped a lot of the guys. I mean, even Harvick did it last year. Is the guys that run the K&N Series race. And I just I fancy someone like Alex Bowman to sort of step up this weekend maybe and. He's been running reasonably well the last few races, and Hendrick and some of the Chevy cars are slowly turning the corner, and it won't surprise me if he maybe not win, but certainly top 5.
I just think at this point in the season, right where we're at, I just think the status quo is going to hold serve. I mean, those guys are just all those teams right now at the top of their game. They come in with a lot of momentum. And I just don't see anybody, and Seth made a good point. Good place for a Hail Mary out there, but I just think right now when we go out there, I think you'll see some of those guys probably do pretty well in qualifying. But I just think the overall strength of those teams that they have will come to the forefront during the race.
Although, to be fair, this is where Stewart-Haas Racing last year started to turn the corner after switching to Ford. This was the first race they had won as a Ford team with Kevin Harvick.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and speaking of Stewart-Haas, I mean, I really got to look at a guy like Clint Boyer, who for from 2013 to 2017 went winless. He had a couple of lean seasons. He did a season with a underfunded team, waiting for Tony Stewart to retire and step away till he was finally able to get back again in a Top Cup ride. And we've seen him win twice already this year. We know he runs well at Sonoma. He's won there in the past. I think this guy is like kind of primed and ready to remake his name in NASCAR and not sit idly by while Harvick and Kyle rack up all the wins. So I've got my money on Clint Boyer for this weekend. Now, Chris, do you got a dog in this race, or?
I think Kyle Busch is going to win this one. I think, given how his season's gone so far, I think it's going to be tough to beat. I think he's going to pull this one off, frankly.
Okay. All right, so do you want to make that your official pick?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'll make Clinton Boyer my official pick, and we'll go back around to you other three cats for your one and official pick.
I'm going to say Harvick's going to repeat.
All right, Seth?
I'm going to go, like I said, and say someone does a Hail Mary. I'll do A.J. Allmendinger.
All right, and Richard?
Eric Almirola.
Eric Almirola. There you go. All right, so we're getting towards the end of the show. So, let's do our IndyCar picks for Road America. And Chris, I'll start with you. Who do you like? Who do you like for Road America to make for your one and official pick?
I'll say Rossi on this.
Rossi on this, okay. And Richard?
Newgarden.
Newgarden, okay. And Gray?
Will
Power, excellent pick. Seth?
All right.
Hunter Ray. And I will say Robert Wickens picks up his first win.
I thought about that.
Yeah.
Didn't say it though, did you?
I didn't say it, but I was thinking. But I mean, because he's on these. He's had some good runs this year.
And this track will be right in his wheelhouse too, with the circus he's been racing in over in Europe. So, but we'll see. I mean, it depends unless the Chevys are just so dominant. So, and the one guy we didn't pick, who desperately needs a win. No, the guy that desperately needs a win that we didn't pick was Simon Pagenaud. And but I put him on my fantasy team. So good luck to you too, Simon. So, and now Richard, Formula One is in France this weekend. Is that correct?
It is. Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
so we're
France.
back to the British, the European schedule, away from the flyaway races. So let's we got about 3 minutes. Let's preview the French Grand Prix real quick, and then let's make some picks, Richard.
Well, it's again a bit of an unknown. First return to France in, I believe, about 10 years, and first return to Paul Ricard since the early 90s. So it's going to be an interesting race. I mean, the preparation of these guys is so complete these days that there's going to be very, very minimal learning curve for the top guys to get used to the track. But you look at the track, there's 2 or 3 really long straights, and almost very, very similar to Canada in a way. You would imagine that if Mercedes have bought their upgraded engine, I'm not quite sure on the status of that, they may be, then they'll be competitive. But if not, hey, the Ferraris are, could be the team to beat again. But it's going to be good. The one interesting thing about Paul Ricard, which may be a little bit confusing to some of the fans watching, is it used to be, after it hosted its last race in 1990, it was bought out by Bernie Ecclestone and turned into what they called the high-speed test track, a high-performance test track. And there's more configurations to that place now, hot dinners. And certainly on the back of the track, where there's a little chicane on the back stretch, there's a dozen different configurations to that chicane. And looking at it, even Lewis Hamilton was saying in the preview video, it's a bit confusing as to which apex you need to turn in on. So hopefully, I don't know if they've done anything for the race and the TV and maybe painted over the other parts of the track, but it's quite a thing to see how it's all laid out, and some of the markings there. It could be a little bit confusing on TV. Hope not, but could be.
And who would you like to pick to win that race?
Bottas.
Seth, who do you like?
Vettel.
Gray?
I'm going to have to say Vettel.
And Chris?
I'll take Raikkonen.
All right, so that leaves me, Daniel Ricciardo. I'll go with that. So, and with that being said, we are right at the end of our time. So I want to thank you folks for tuning in and listening. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and Vimeo for hosting us. I want to thank you, Greg, Chris, Richard, Youden, all you folks that listen in. Till next week, we'll talk to you then. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.